Mr. Dhawan, Mr. Prince, whatever you
Anything.
prefer. Okay.
Dear all, welcome once again to a fireside chat on digitally transforming governance at the 15th India Digital Summit. Welcome to our moderator, Mr. Vibhor Sharma, ex-CTO, InfoEdge India Limited. Now welcoming our speaker, Shri Prince Dhawan, Special Commissioner, Trade and Taxes, Special Secretary Finance and Special Secretary IT, Government of Delhi. Over to you, Mr. Sharma, for the discussion.
Thank you. A very warm welcome, Mr. Dhawan.
Hi, thank you. Thank you very much, Vibhorji.
Let's start, and by jumping in straight off. I mean, you've been to, different states in the country. You've been to urban places. You've been to some remote places as well. What is your, understanding of the contrast that is out there, in terms of the reach of internet, the penetration of internet, how people use digital, and so on. I mean, and looking at that as the foundation, we will talk about the digital transformation on e-governance.
Yeah, so the way I see it is that, today the main topic for our chat is taking these innovative digital services beyond the first 100 million and how we can innovate in terms of governance and the social good, using technology for social good. So as you pointed out, I have been to both kinds of places broadly, urban as well as rural areas during my previous tenures. So I have spent considerable time in places, metro cities like Delhi, Mumbai, as well as urban areas like Chandigarh, which is a perfect urban city. And then I also spent close to 6 years, 6 years in the Northeast, which is your typical rural hinterland kind of setup. And there is a lot of contrast. What we have now in these COVID times come to call as a digital divide between these two segments, I would say, of our demography. And I believe that the context setting has to be done first by understanding what this contrast is between the urban and rural areas, and where is the first 100 million situated, and then where is this next 100 million that we are talking about. So to contextualize the discussion, I would just like to share some of my experiences in instance in these areas. So for instance, I had been posted in Chandigarh looking after the work of IT, and the kind of work that we from the government's perspective were looking at in a town like Chandigarh was more on having achieved a basic level of, say, connectivity, stabilization in terms of connectivity, fiberization, tele-density. Having achieved that, the goal was how you can then use this backend infrastructure to further enhance service delivery to the citizens. So you didn't need to kind of worry about the basics in cities which were already well established, and even the private players were well established there. You had telecom companies who were providing a fairly good and stable internet. But now contrast that to, say, when I moved to Arunachal Pradesh, where I served in the capital Itanagar, and I also served in another district, Lohit. The main concern was how fast is my internet if I want to develop an application, say, for paying bills. So whether my users will be able to log into the system, whether they'll have reliable net connectivity to access this service that the government is providing them, is a question mark in itself. So that is the area where I think somehow we have been lacking in using technology to enhance social good, and in using technology to enhance and improve governance. So I believe that it is going to be critical if we talk about taking digital services beyond the first 100 million to worry about the basic telecom infrastructure. Let me also put some figures out there so that we are able to understand in quantifiable terms. Very recently, TRAI has come out with the teledensity figures based on 2019-20 data. And if you would see nationally, we have a teledensity of 90. And in urban areas, the teledensity is crossing 150. Whereas in rural areas, our teledensity is still around 55, 56. So there's a huge contrast between the teledensity figures. Similarly, if you were to talk about fiberization, it's practically absent in the area that I served in the Northeast. Most of the people are relying on net from your telecom providers, which is a 3G or even a 2G data, and as they call the segmentation between broadband and narrowband. So narrowband in terms of TRAI is anything that is less than 512 kbps. And it will be astonishing for you to note that more than 62 million population is still in narrowband in the country, which is also a considerable number, given that narrowband effectively is not going to be able to sustain any kind of digital service delivery. In this context, once again, if we come to the government initiatives that are being taken to develop this this kind of infrastructure, we have the USOF, which is the Universal Service Obligation Fund.
Before we jump into that, I have a question that if you look at the new stack rank of livelihood, previously it was roti, kapda, makan. What you're now saying is beyond roti, kapda, makan, it is also electricity, water, sanitization, and internet, narrow, broadband, whatever you have me. So, why is it so relevant for digitization or digital reach or internet penetration to bump up, in the stack rank, to reach these 100, beyond these 100 million people? I mean.
So the way I see it is that from my own experience, this is a very valid question as to why are we first talking about this infrastructure in the first place. I feel that if this is not in place in a scenario where you don't have this, you can develop services, but you won't get users to access them. So you may still be able to have, I may still develop a platform where citizen can apply for, say, getting his income certificate or getting his Aadhaar card or ration card online. So I can do that. That will not be hit by absence of this kind of a basic infrastructure. But now, coming from the citizen's viewpoint as to the access to that service, I think that will be majorly hit if we don't worry about this kind of a basic infrastructure.
Okay. So if I understand correctly, moving on from the current state of affairs in the way governance has been done to riding on the back of digital, the velocity that can be attained is far superior. The transparency that can come in is far more as opposed to the current scheme of things, and that's why it is absolutely imperative for digital to reach beyond 100 million, where a lot of these issues still continue to plague things.
Absolutely. In fact, if you see latest figures as per the, of course, 2011 census, which is also dated data now, 130 crore is the estimated population of our country. So when you talk about huge numbers, technology is the only way to run your administration efficiently. And not just about administration. In fact, even the private sector would look towards technology in providing services. Now you have computerized systems, back office systems, which are not computerized, will not sustain. So I feel that technology, certainly not just government, but even the private sector will be utilizing newer and faster technology to enhance service delivery, enhance efficiency, to improve transparency and customer satisfaction ultimately.
Absolutely. Now, in the last decade or so, I mean, you've seen a lot of digital sort of projects come up, and some of them have been extremely successful. You were sort of talking about them when I interjected. So please, tell us more about them.
Yeah, so I was just kind of delving into the some of the government initiatives that are being taken to cater to the basic infrastructure progress, and that includes, as I was mentioning, about the USOF, which is a Universal Service Obligation Fund, where all the telcos and other ISPs, they pitch in some amount of their earnings, which then the government reinvests in building up this basic infrastructure in places where probably just driven by commercial concerns, private investment will not be very forthcoming. So that is a duty of the government, and I think that is being done by operationalizing this fund. Now, the proceeds from this fund are being used in various schemes. We have all heard about the immensely popular Bharat Net program. The attempt was to bring internet to Gram Panchayats by this program, so that this is where your beyond 100 million resides. So
Sure.
This is where you would want to develop this kind of an infrastructure. And this is where probably private investment was not forthcoming upfront. So therefore, it was decided to launch programs such as BharatNet. Then very recently, the National Broadband Mission has come up, wherein you are targeting complete fiberization, saturation of fiberization in, say, the urban areas, as well as enhancement of fiberization in the rural areas. I would also like to just sidestep a bit here and briefly mention about this this debate as to why is fiberization necessary as opposed to say your 3G or 4G kind of connectivity. This is a very important aspect. You see, fiberization is ultimately the backbone, and it is where your future set of technologies will lie. And of course, the reach of 3G and 4G is unparalleled. You can easily set up infrastructure as compared to fiberizing, but the speeds will be always limited. So therefore, there is always a kind of tilt towards fiberizing. However, we must not let the best be the enemy of the good. So therefore, while we do continue to develop on those aspects, at the same time, 3G penetration and 4G penetration, and then hopefully in the coming times, very soon, even 5G penetration will pick up. And then government has also started promoting. So that is about the basic infrastructure. Now, coming to beyond that, services that use this basic infrastructure, how do you ensure that people use those services? Having given this basic infrastructure, having developed the services, how do you then ensure that people start using them and it starts reaching out to the intended customer base? And I think a key aspect there is how easier it makes the normal life of the citizen. How easier it would make life for your customer. So if it's easy for me to pay cash for my bill at a counter, I will do it, as opposed to if it's easier for me to just do that transaction from my mobile, I'll do it from my phone. So what is easy for me is the key. And I believe that is an important aspect. We see many government services being provided online, yet people lining up at the government office to avail those services rather than availing them online.
True.
Why? Because somewhere people don't find it very easy to take that service online, or they feel that some kind of a human interaction is critical, without which the service delivery will not happen. So these are all aspects that ultimately need to be looked into.
Absolutely.
And if you so just finishing that point off. So if you were to look at apps such as Bheem app for digital payment, or Arogya Setu app that came up in COVID times. These have become widely popular, and they are serving the intended purpose where the customer base is latching onto these platforms and using them because it is giving them some utility, some enhanced ease in their life. So I believe that that is an aspect that needs to be looked into while taking services to this beyond 100 million.
Absolutely. Although I still think that the fiberization is a moot point still. Because on the go connectivity versus stationary connectivity, like you mentioned,
Right.
will still be debatable. So I mean, that is something to be sort of looked at. But tell me, I mean, you mentioned Arogya Setu and the whole digitization, which was on the foundation of Aadhaar. The question that always crops up when one talks about these two projects is the privacy and the security of an individual's data. So the confidence level of citizens, what do you reckon is the confidence level of the citizens about applications such as these, and how do you sort of look at alleviating those concerns down the line as this becomes a broader base or foundation for transforming governance?
That's a very, I would say, a very important topic, and it's been especially our participants of this, listeners of this conversation would obviously be relating to this whole WhatsApp thing that has been doing the rounds, where suddenly some terms and conditions were changed and users were asked to either agree or switch out. So data privacy is certainly a key area of concern, and in this context you would see that the government has also brought a bill for this data on which dwells into aspects of data privacy. There is a proposal to establish a council for looking into data privacy issues, and this is going to be critical because even in the economic survey of last year, this was mentioned that government has a lot of data. And the citizen, first of all, is not sure about whether that data is being used for the purpose for which the citizen had given that data to the government. And B, at the same time, even government is not sure whether the data that it sits upon, has it totally been able to use that data to enhance its own services or not. So this concept of data economy has come up in that discourse. And wherever you would have data economy, you would have issues of data privacy. Mm-hmm. It's like saying that if I have my cash balance or my proceeds, I would like that to be private. I would like that information to be private. Similarly, if I have some data that I'm sharing, I would like that to be also private. And I believe that citizens have become more aware. If you look at the EU, or if you look at the big tech 4 companies, they have different policies for the kind of data sharing protocols that say WhatsApp or Facebook would be implementing for India is not the same that they are implementing for US or that they are implementing for the EU as a whole. And the EU has been the leader globally in enforcing data privacy concerns and in making sure that the data that is given by their citizens certainly is protected, well protected and secured. And India certainly is catching up, and we are making sure these days that data remains private for the citizens. I believe it's going to be a developing course. It's a new emerging topic, and still a lot of work needs to be done in this area.
Right. You mentioned EU. Yes, they're very stringent about all of these things. But talking about the West, I mean, from the standpoint and lens of e-governance, how do you think our country sort of stands in comparison to how governance is being done, riding on the digital sort of platforms and wave in the West? I mean,
yeah. So that is a very, very apt course of discussion, because as we see, technology, a lot of technology is developed in the US or the West, as you said broadly, but particularly in the US, and then it's exported globally for use. So you would see platforms such as Google, Facebook, big companies all doing their holding their IPR in the US, but they wouldn't need any kind of publicity per se, or any kind of extra effort per se to penetrate other markets. There would be a demand for those services. You would seldom see an ad by Google. Maybe somewhere once or twice you would see a Google map ad that it makes your life easier. But I have rarely seen an ad where Google is publicizing Gmail or publicizing Google search, because it's just so, there's just so much demand. Now contrast that to some initiatives within India. I believe, yes, there is a long mile to go there. And even the government has come up with the promotion of startups, promotion of indigenous local born startups, promoting mobile apps that are being developed within the country, and also at the same time even a Play Store. Very recently CDAC has developed a whole new Indian Play Store, which is on the lines of your Google Play and Apple Play Store. So I believe that yes, things are catching up. If you see, hyper localization is the key here. What I believe is the more a service is hyper localized, the more the demand will be auto generated without much of marketing or much of the kind of effort on part of non on the non technology side.
Sure.
I want to give example of app which may not be very well known in the urban area. In the first 100 million, as they say, we all know Zomato. Everyone knows Zomato in the urban cities. But if I were to go to a tier C city, Zomato is not present there. But the need of the people is the same. People would still want to order food online, or to go out and see a recommendation of the list of available restaurants in that area. And Me Buddy is an app which has done considerably well in Andhra Pradesh. Now they have presence in Arunachal Pradesh. That's how I came to know about it. And I think that the app is doing exactly what Zomato does, but it's trying to reach the beyond 100 million. Similarly, you have other homegrown apps which are targeting specifically beyond 100 million. And that is where the next market is. By the way, that's going to be an important point. Wherever the market is, investment will flow there. And I think that the next market is certainly there in the beyond 100 million, because you have numbers there. So emerging sectors such as technology for farming, emerging sectors such as weather predictions, such as even local social media, which engaging with government on m-governance platforms, or in COVID times, we have all seen tele-education in a big way. Schools are closed, colleges were closed for a long period of time. Now they've slowly started opening up, but now tele-education is here to stay. Similarly, telemedicine is here to stay. So all these are areas. And then, of course, how can we forget banking? Because banking is the back end for everything. And all these areas, now things are coming up. You see indigenous apps more and more, people using indigenous apps more and more. Recently, when Government of India banned few apps, Chinese apps, then many Indian apps suddenly, overnight, I would say they got so much traffic flowing in that automatically they pumped up their servers and their capacities, and they started catering to the increased demand. So I feel that yes, we need to look at the West. We need to kind of see what is happening there. A considerable influence still is there from the West, but that is not in any way a negative aspect. It's always good to have a global technology base. Tomorrow, I would also want my indigenous technology developed in India being exported to West to other parts of the globe, we would also want that. So it is not, as they say now these days, the whole world is one. So we would not look at it as a particularly negative aspect. However, while looking at it, we would also want that the indigenous developers, indigenous technology does catch up in that area, and it is doing so. It is doing so.
So there are 2-3 sort of takeaways for me from that observation that you shared. One is obviously the fact that there needs to be a significant amount of awareness / evangelization of digital platform and properties themselves. And there may be a possibility of a government and private sort of partnership. In the past, we had seen some announcements where some of the companies, or these big tech companies, were sort of going to sort of offer free internet, to some of the rural areas. So if you have some thoughts on that. One is that. Second, you're saying the key sectors that need a lot of innovation, are agriculture, finance, education, healthcare.
True.
From the standpoint of going beyond the 100 million, I mean, these are the areas where a lot of reach needs to be done. The challenge is that mostly people who are looking at the current 100 million, they find it harder to sort of think about ideas on innovation because of the ability to spend for these people who are beyond these 100 million. So how do you foster that balance between social, innovation for social cause or good, and creating platforms which these people who are beyond the current 100 million end up using?
Yeah. So that again is an area where I feel from my past experience, where to a limited extent, yes, government has to step in. It has to kind of create an enabling environment where by say these policies such as promoting startups, where in these areas, maybe giving them seed funds, maybe government acting like a pseudo venture capitalist for these upcoming startups in these areas. That certainly will have to be done, especially to give an initial push to development of services which cater to the beyond 100 million. But slowly, I'm sure that the market develops on its own. We all know that for the longest period of time, after having developed the search engine, Google did not know how to monetize it. They were just driven by the need for providing a better technology to people. I think once that is the key driver of how you can make the life of people in the beyond the 100 million better, that segment of population, how they can, maybe by breaking down language barriers, they may not be very much conversant with English or even Hindi in regional areas. Similarly, maybe even making apps easier to use. Nobody teaches you how to use Facebook or WhatsApp. You just learn it on your own. But then if you want to say apply for a caste certificate online, you would rather need help of some kind of a third party, say a service provider, or you see even in cities like Delhi, for that instance, there are so many shops where you would see these small advertisements. Get your PAN card made for so many rupees, get yourself GST registration for so many rupees. So people tend to take to these third party services. Why? Because the service provision is not easy enough for them to pick it up on their own. So that is where I think the beyond 100, the challenge in catering to the beyond 100 million lies. Once we are able to slowly crack that challenge, the market will develop on its own. The kind of advertisements, platform for sharing advertisements would develop on its own. Then there is as they say, a virtuous cycle of publicity starts happening. Then things just start, as they say, going viral. So slowly it happens over a period of time. And I feel that this initial phase is critical, because unless we give a huge push and we drive towards that end, as to how I can reach the beyond 100 million directly. Unless we do that, we will always face this kind of a challenge where, maybe the commercials may not work out. Maybe there may not be enough user base in those areas. That will remain unless we first try and keep the core of our development being how to make life easier for them. So I think that is going to be the key there.
And so, what are the topmost sort of priorities, from that standpoint? If you look at just making governance better and making it reach, what are the topmost priorities?
So I would say the topmost priority would be probably replicating at least what has been done for the first 100 million. Let's at least try and do that. Whatever has been done for the so let's take an example. For instance, if I can book my ticket online on IRCTC website, I can do that very easily because I'm tech literate and I can understand the website. I can understand the whole thing. But the moment you would ask a tech illiterate person to use that same web interface and book his own ticket, he may actually prefer to pay 10-15 rupees extra to some third party and get it booked through him, who will be using the IRCTC website only to book it. Right. So from the government's perspective, the first and foremost priority will be replicating whatever has been done in the urban areas, at least for the beyond 100 million. And how you would replicate it is maybe by developing content in different local languages, by moving towards mobile governance, rather than being just on an internet based platform. You would which is browser accessed. You would want to move more towards mobile apps kind of a development. And another priority therein would be enhancing digital literacy. You have to, and that is where government I would say will play a major role, wherein to make people aware of not only the possibilities when they switch to technology, but also their own digital rights. What are their rights in the digital arena? Mm-hmm. Because many often we see tech illiterate people may be fleeced by banking frauds. By, these kind of issues where they don't really understand what sharing an OTP implies. What is the kind of significance when they sign that checkbox? I have read the terms and conditions. Mm-hmm. How many of us do we actually read the terms and conditions? Mm-hmm. So those are all the areas where I believe are going to be priority if you want to reach the beyond 100 million from the government's perspective. And also extending that thought just a little bit more, when you go to the private sector's perspective, it's not necessarily different. It's actually on similar lines. So for instance, if you are able to give a particular service in the urban area, you would want that same service to be given with that same quality of service being maintained in the rural area. So here I am going to also introduce another aspect of quality of service, because that is going to be another very important aspect of service delivery. You can't just say, okay, Tata Sky works in say Pune, and you theoretically may have Tata Sky in northeast remote corner, but you are not able to catch the signal. The weather is, there is so much rainfall. It rains almost 80% of 8 months, 9 months are out of 12. There are areas where there is continuous rainfall. So what use would that Tata Sky box would be for a person who is not able to get signal from that box? So the idea is that quality of service is going to be another important factor when you target this beyond 100 million. Understood. And that is going to be key to how fast people adopt technology, take to the technology, and how quickly the technology can find a market for itself. That's going to be a key there.
Right. So therefore, there has to be a pyramid, so to speak of. One baseline is the infrastructure, which is very, very imperative. Like you mentioned, fiber, 3G, 4G, On the top of that, you have basic understanding of how governance would work, which kind of features and services are imperative for people, and it's simpler to replicate what's there for the existing 100 million internet users, right? Although the point of not just digital literacy but actual literacy also comes into place there. How do you make these people move on beyond just voice and
Yes.
and use a lot of interfaces where there's a lot of text heavy, even if it is vernacular though. you know Quickly wrapping up, and then we'll take a couple of questions from the audience. What do you see the emerging trends in with regards to sort of governance and digital transformation in the government sort of arenas coming up in the next few years?
In the next few years, in fact, technology is so fast paced, we should probably be talking about just the next year itself. I would say the emerging trends, given the kind of big data that we have, is going to be big data analytics. And big data analytics is based on AI. Machine learning. These are going to be the technologies of the future, because you may not always have capabilities to make sense of unstructured data that is going to be flowing in. You may not be having even you may not be even open to the possibility of how a data can be used. So that is where AI is going to play a big role in the times to come. And another important emerging technology is going to be blockchain, where blockchain essentially is going to address a lot of data privacy concerns, a lot of data security concerns, because your data essentially would remain immutable in the blockchain. And it would be, as they say, non-tamperable, and it would not be lost at any point of time. So there would be no worry of data loss. So that is going to be another upcoming area. Another third upcoming technology area would be GIS based technologies, because a lot of services are now hyper local. They are contextualized. I may be giving A kind of service in a particular area and a B kind of service in another area. So that is going to be another key emerging area in the times to come. That is broadly the way I see it for the next year. And then, of course, you would have the mobile app development, which is going to, I think, undergo a revolution, because there are going to be more, the way I see it, say with the government launching its own Play Store now. There is going to be a lot happening in that area, because of the recent, we have seen skirmishes happening between many companies with, say, even Apple Play Store, or with other Play Stores, where somewhere or the other, the Play Stores tend to veto some kind of development decisions of individual apps. So we would also like to have a more open source kind of a platform there. And that is going to be a very big game changer in the times to come.
Interesting. Open, but still, regulated to some extent, I'm guessing.
Right. Yeah, and just while finishing off, you did mention the regulation aspect, which is what governments are always very keenly watching. And of course, regulation is going to be critical, because you have an imbalance in the data economy. The economy is not balanced. I as a single citizen cannot assert my data rights very easily against, say, Instagram, or against, say, Facebook. It's not going to be easy for me. So I would need an intermediary to regulate this highly fluid digital space. And I feel that upcoming legislation in this area is an area to be watched out for.
Yeah, and that'll be an interesting area to dive in also. Let me just move to some of the questions that we might have.
Yeah, okay. Sure.
So, where do we stand in terms of digital economy compared to other nations? This we've covered. Sectors, awareness also we've covered. So this is an interesting one. If one were to start with a blank slate and design a digital governance, what would be the key pillars to design such a framework?
Yeah, I think that's a thinker. I would say pillars would probably, you would start, pillar number one is what we have already discussed, is the basic infrastructure. You need to provide basic tech infrastructure, as they say. So that would be the pillar number one. Pillar number two, I think, is, if we were to start from a blank slate, I would say pillar number two would be to make life easy for the citizen. How I can do that? That would be the key. Keeping citizen, or my since I am from the government, I tend to use the word citizen more, but it's, what I mean is that keeping the customer, the client at the center, the client of a service, is going to be your pillar number two. Pillar number three is, of course, going to be data privacy, because and data security. That is going to be there. And pillar number four is, of course, going to be regulation. So I think those are broadly your four pillars on which any new technology will develop itself.
Absolutely. This is also an interesting one. What are the top three sectors, according to you, which are far from digital today and need focus on digital innovation? The moment I'm reading this, I think of the law and order sort of paradigm. Although I know some people who've said that post pandemic, a lot of stuff in the judiciary has moved completely online, and a lot of transformation is happening there. But your take on it?
Yeah, no, in fact, you're absolutely correct. First and foremost sector that comes to my mind would definitely be the farming sector. We have been very late bloomers. In fact, I wouldn't still say that we have bloomed in that area, but we have started doing something, but it's still an area to be looked out for. Farming sector, using technology to enhance production, to give the right kind of inputs, while farming is going to be a key area where I think we have kind of we are still far away from there. Another key area, as you very rightly mentioned, is access to justice. I think that is going to be area where we have not yet been able to make as much inroads, as much progress as we would have wanted to. And third area that comes to my mind is going to be developing a two-way conversation between the government and the citizens, or between not just, and here I would not restrict myself to government as well. Developing a two-way conversation between any private company and its client base. How often do we see, if I have a complaint with Facebook, can I communicate that to Facebook? Do I have satisfactory means of doing that with Facebook? Or if I have a complaint and issue with any other thing? I think in recent times, the only campaign that comes to my mind is Airtel's campaign, where they have said that we will, talk to you and take all your questions and bring
grievance redressal.
So that grievance redressal online grievance redressal without physically having to visit a premises is another area that needs to be looked into using technology.
Sounds good. Splendid. It was lovely chatting with you. I think that's a wrap from us.
Great. And Vibhorji, thank you so much for having me here, and the entire Express team and the IMAI team. I am very much thankful to all of you for inviting me and giving me a chance to be a part of this lovely Digital India Summit. And I hope the session was beneficial to the participants, and please feel free to reach out to me even otherwise on my email ID. It's simply princedhawan@gmail.com is just my name. So please feel free if you have questions, suggestions, ideas, or even otherwise, since I am looking after IT for the government of Delhi right now as a special secretary, I would request people to reach out to me with new ideas that can help us make lives of citizens easy.
Splendid. Thank you. That's the starting of a two-way conversation already.
Thank you, Vibhorji.
All right.
Thank you, Mr. Sharma. Thank you, Dhawan sir. Thank you to our diamond partner, Google, platinum partners, InMobi and Facebook. Dear audience, please stay tuned for few more sessions in line. Goodbye.
Thanks.
Thanks.
Thank you.